Hi everyone, and welcome to our Women's Health online event. I am Melissa, the founder of the Seed Cycle, and we are on a big mission to help women balance their hormones naturally. I am really excited to introduce our guests today, Alice and Gina from the Body and Beyond podcast. Hi girls.
Hello.
Now, for those of you who don't know, I want to introduce both of you. So Alice is a women's online health and fitness coach with a diploma in fitness and personal training and an advanced certificate in nutrition and health, specialising in sports and exercise nutrition. She is also a pro bikini model and loves bodybuilding and competing. She's very good at it too, guys. And Alice has been working in the industry for nearly 10 years, working with women in personal training face-to-face, and now working online to support women in achieving health and fitness goals through training and nutrition programs.
Hello. Thanks for that long intro, Mel.
I love it. And Gina, so Gina is a developmental and performance coach, personal trainer, gym owner with 13 years experience in the fitness industry. Gina has degrees in coaching and exercise science and management. In recent years, Gina has specialised in neuro linguistic programming and meta coaching. She supports her clients through personal development to navigate their internal world and support them to finally identify and free themselves from their self-imposed limitations. Welcome, Gina.
Hello.
Like I said,
Thanks
I'm so excited to talk to you guys. And I'd really love to get into today's topic, which is the menstrual cycle and training. I have to say it's only in recent years that I've learned the role of my menstrual cycle when it comes to training. With my own experience, it's kind of like some days feel better than others when you're exercising, and often when I would have a hard day, I would just think, oh, it's because I'm unfit, I haven't been training enough, and never really saw or understood the link between where I'm at in my cycle and my hormones. So yes, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would be in the same boat. So I would love for you guys to introduce us to this concept for those who maybe haven't considered their menstrual cycle, hormones, and training.
Yeah, well, it's a powerful thing, isn't it? Really getting to know you and your cycle in so many aspects of your life, and training is just one of those things. So we're definitely going to dive a little bit deeper into how we can sort of be aware of our cycle and how that can have possible effects on our training. So
yeah, it makes so much sense now that I realize it. But yeah, never before had I considered my menstrual cycle when it came to exercise.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. We wanted to start off by saying we are not doctors or hormone specialists. So Alice and I have obviously, like you mentioned, Mel, we've had many, many years in the fitness industry, lots of experience with coaching, working with humans, and our own research and study we've been doing. So we just wanted to preface that to start with. And we do encourage people to, of course, see a specialist if they ever have any concerns about their health or hormones or their menstrual cycle. Make sure you check in with your doctor and then go on and get referrals from there to seek assistance. But Al, do you want to kick us off? We've got some common training around the menstrual cycle advice to start us off.
Yeah, well, look, I think I think there's part people who probably haven't even thought of it before, like yourself, Mel, who's never thought of, training around your menstrual cycle. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where it is common to hear advice to train around your menstrual cycle in a very, very specific way as well. So really, I think our advice today is sort of, as always, it kind of depends a little bit on the individual, on what goals they have currently with their training as well. And that will kind of play into it a little bit when it comes to what you can adjust and what you might keep in mind when it comes to training and planning according to your menstrual cycle.
And there's some different, I guess, methodologies or different advice that you can hear out there where certain people may recommend, do yoga at this phase of your cycle, do strength training during this phase of your cycle, do high intensity interval training here, but really this kind of advice doesn't take into account or optimize any sort of progressive overload program or anyone who's really focusing on muscle growth. So that may be really good advice for someone who has a general health club membership, perhaps, and they attend lots of different fitness classes. That might be great advice. But really, and Ali might take us into this, if someone's got very specific strength and training, muscle growth kind of goals, we don't want to necessarily be chopping and changing between styles of training. We want to look at holistically what's your goal, and then how you factoring in different phases of strength or flexibility training. What are you doing to empower yourself and feel really good about your physicality and about your training as well?
Yeah. So I guess really to kick it off, we will probably want to chat a little more about our phases of our cycle. And today we're going to kind of split that into 4 phases. So we're covering the menstrual cycle phase, so your bleeding phase basically, the follicular phase, ovulation phase, and the luteal phase as well. So obviously your hormones will naturally shift during this monthly cycle, which can alter the way that we feel, which I'm pretty sure we all know, but also how our body runs as well. And these can be helpful. It can be helpful to obviously align certain things in your lifestyle. And I'm sure people have heard, even with work, meetings and what kind of work you're doing, but obviously with training as well. We recognize that while this can be helpful for some, it's not always a possibility and will depend on the individual, like Gina was just saying before. So yeah, do you want to start by taking us through, I guess, the menstrual phase or early follicular phase, Gina?
Yeah, certainly. So those of you who are seed cycling, I'm sure you're quite familiar with your follicular phase and your luteal phase. So they're the 2 main components of the menstrual cycle. Within the follicular phase, we've got our early phase, which is our menstruation phase. So typically for a lot of women, their period goes from, say, 3 to 5 days. And that's where both estrogen and progesterone are quite low in the cycle. Then we shift through to the remaining time of the follicular phase. And that can be anywhere from 10 to 22 days. And really that whole phase is from the first day of your period through to when you ovulate. And when you do ovulate, that's where the estrogen rises as an egg prepares to be released. Estrogen peaks just before ovulation. Ovulation phase, Al.
Yeah, so during your ovulation phase, which can be typically about 13 to 15 days prior to your next period, your estrogen levels rise and peak. So then after obviously your ovulation phase, you come into your luteal phase. This can last around 14 days, 9 up into 16 is common. Again, when we say these things, it can vary so much between women to women, right? So we don't want to take them exactly as written, but in this phase, progesterone levels peak about halfway through this phase, and if no egg is fertilized or no egg fertilization occurs, estrogen and progesterone will start to drop again before your menstrual cycle. So where are we at? Luteal phase. So I guess that brings us into, after knowing more about the changes that happen with our hormones in these phases, what are the types of training considerations that we need to think about during these different phases, right?
And there's a few factors to consider. It's really important, first of all, to notice that it's important women pay attention to what's regular for them, what's happening for them, and start to take note of that. Yes, some women may feel fatigued during the first day or 2 of their period, but this can be really individual. And a lot of women don't. They feel fantastic throughout their period. Really, that area of fatigue may be in the days prior or leading up to their period. So I just wanted to note that it can be common, or I think we've got some myths a little bit down the line, but it can be common advice for women to not train during their period, or you're going to be really tired, and that kind of attitude, when really it is individual, and we encourage people to assess their own individual situation.
And it can change. Sorry, I just will say it can change month to month. Like I know
Sure.
that if I have had a really stressful month or cycle, then when it comes to my menstrual, when in the menstrual phase, then I can really feel the fatigue. But if I've had a month where I have been in flow, I've been consistent with my seed cycling, I have, you know, been doing all the things to take care of myself, then yeah, like it feels really easy. And much easier. The other thing I'll say, like, I really like that you guys talked about the 4 phases, because that's another thing that I didn't know about. It was just like, I thought like it was just like the menstrual cycle. I just thought it was like while you're bleeding, and you know, it's only in the last couple of years that I've really understood those 4 phases and how much, like you explained, how much your hormones fluctuate within those phases. So so cool.
Yeah, exactly. So if we do dive into that follicular phase at the start, obviously, leaving those couple the couple days at the start where you are, you know, during your menstrual cycle and you are bleeding, obviously that can differ for people depending on what kind of symptoms they have. But generally, this will be the phase where you will see and you'll hear that people really do suggest going for that high intensity, going for PBs as your estrogen levels rise throughout that particular phase. So generally you may feel more strong, more powerful, more energetic. So that is why, you know, people do suggest if you're going for PBs or if you're going to do something high intensity in those first few weeks of your cycle in the follicular phase would be the part that you'd want to do that generally.
Yeah, and it's a really great time to harness that natural energy that you'll be feeling. And it's a fantastic time to look at your progressive overload and really maximize those sessions. So, you know, like structuring or planning out your week and knowing that when you're in, you know, that powerful time, making sure you're getting in that volume and getting in those training sessions compared to, you know, going on holiday or having days off, rest days during those days. If you're really performance or athletically minded, those are great days to maximize.
Yeah,
and it's just easier to get to get to training sessions, I find, in the follicular phase. It's not, you know, you don't really have to use a lot of like self-motivation. It's just, yeah, you're there and you're on. So like just enjoying that, I find that's what I've really been doing the last couple of months, is enjoying that, like, oh, this is easy. I can just get there.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it, Mel? Because it's not only the physiological changes that are happening, but it's also the psychological changes that are going on as well, right? So even keeping in mind the types of training that you might want to go for in this phase, it's also, like you just mentioned, you just feel great mentally as well. So that could be, it could be another factor that plays into that as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And a couple of myths we had down around the actual menstruation phase. So that is still considering the follicular phase, of course, the start of the follicular phase. Like I mentioned before, some myths like you shouldn't train during your period. You know, that could be, yes, that could be advice, or maybe not advice. That could be the reality for some women, unfortunately, if they're going through some health concerns or they have experienced really, really painful periods. That may be something they need to take into account. But a lot of women who do have a healthy menstrual cycle, they honestly can exercise during their period, and it may really help you to feel fresh and like energized and get all those happy, you know, happy endorphins and all the other benefits of exercise as well. Can you guys relate to that?
Oh, totally.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it is something to keep in mind, because often people will assume that, oh, I feel this way and I have no energy. And so they'll choose the option of not doing anything. But often, you know, exercise can help to actually energize you and make you feel better. So
yeah, and it's important not to state yourself or preempt that, oh, I have my period, therefore I'm going to feel horrible, you know. So really, really, you know, wake up in the morning and assess how you're feeling on that day and go with that and understand the benefits of exercise. Also, some people may experience fatigue during their bleed phase, but again, that's not correlated across everyone. And then another myth is that often that people think that when they have their period, their performance is going to decrease, when really for a lot of women, like we were saying, that that subjective or the emotional feelings and that kind of thing may be down a little prior to getting the period or getting the bleed, whereas when we start to actually bleed, that sense of relief and that all those, everything's on the upwards. So really that follicular phase is such a powerful phase for training. So try not to state yourself into these common myths that may be out there.
Yeah, and also don't forget, guys, how many female athletes in the Olympics and are out there getting gold medals and doing PBs at whatever time of the cycle they have to do that on, right? Like they can still make it happen. So it's important that you don't see it as a limitation in such a way, but more just have that awareness around it, I guess.
Exactly.
So that brings us into training considerations for the luteal phase or luteal phase, which is basically after you've come through your ovulation phase.
So our metabolism speeds up. The body requires a little bit more energy. And then things like your estrogen, your testosterone, and your blood sugar levels do dip, meaning you are coming down into that slightly less energy phase. It can be common to reach exhaustion faster when compared to the follicular phase. And this is also a time when a lot of women potentially start to notice or feel those PMS kind of symptoms like bloating or fatigue. But again, that is individual. And I want to encourage you as well to consider what are the other factors, what else is going on for you to start experiencing those symptoms. Is it purely hormonal, or is there other stuff happening in your life? Like Mel was mentioning, things like stress, or things like, taking on too much, or nutrition, things like your lack of sleep. So there's just so many factors going on, right, which may be amplifying PMS symptoms. So just taking into consider those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like we do know, there can be effects on your central nervous system, hence the fatigue. And also, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, Mel, but obviously the body has more relaxin during this phase of your cycle too. So I think typically some people may hear a little about being more injury prone because of this. I think that, from what we've kind of read about, it's really quite sort of limiting data on that specifically, I think, but it's just something more or less that it does happen. But provided you've got a good training program, and you're doing everything safely, it's not something that's going to sort of put you at risk for injury as such, I would say. But that's definitely something I have heard people worry about. I think like they've heard of this and then they think that, because of this, they shouldn't go for PBs or they shouldn't push themselves because they are just generally more injury prone during that period.
For those of you who are training for strength and hypertrophy goals, this can be a great period to consider having a deload week, or a week where you at least aim to maintain and not necessarily progress in your load or hit any PBs. So that can be a really, something to consider. And overall, as we've been saying the whole time, our message is to listen to your body and know that, of course, you can take a step back if you need to. You can stay at maintenance with your output or your load, your training. You don't necessarily need to be progressing all the way through the cycle, of course. So this is actually a really good time to pull back a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's where my headspace was prior to understanding some of this. It was like I always need to be progressing, and I'm training however many times a week, so I need to be doing better and seeing improvements and lifting heavy or whatever it is. But it's like you just said, Gina, sometimes it's just you don't always have to be in that progressing
mentality.
phase. Yeah,
exactly.
Which takes so much pressure off.
It does. And that's something we both speak about so much on our podcast. We talk about that long-term, what's your long-term vision? What's your long-term goal? And how are you showing up every day to contribute towards that? Doesn't mean you're going to progress literally every single day or every single week. Sometimes a step back is actually 2 steps forward the next week, so it's just being intelligent with training, the way you're talking to yourself, the way you're treating yourself, and just the way you show up.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind for those who are on specifically, progressive overload type programs, because I feel like even just chatting amongst clients, there is a bit of a pressure that, in order to get the results, you must be using progressive overload, which means basically every single week you must be progressing, right? That's the principle of progressive overload. But it is just something to keep in mind. If you do have weeks where you find yourself, oh, it's just not happening this week. Why can't I get heavier? Or why can't I hit what I hit last week? It's obviously, useful to tune into your cycle, because it may have something to do with that. And then knowing that is going to, probably mean that you're going to be less harsh on yourself when it comes to expecting or having these expectations.
Yeah. And then Mel, you were curious around how we personally.
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask. You've really shared a lot of the benefits and of the awareness around your menstrual cycle and things you can do. But I'd love to know, like, individually, how you guys train with your menstrual cycle, and also how you do it with clients.
You
Yeah,
want to start us off? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, obviously, like I did mention in my intro, I do compete and I do love bodybuilding. So my programming is very progressive overload based, very consistent, hitting numbers, recording my progress each week. So for me personally, I definitely do track my menstrual cycle. Also important to mention, I'm not on any contraception too. So it is my natural cycle that I'm tracking. And yeah, I guess for me, it's one of those situations where I'm not in a position to be able to lay low and go for a swim instead, or go for a walk instead, because I am competing and I have competition. So I've got to go in and I have to do the session that's programmed for me to do. But I think it's more of the mindset around, like I just mentioned, if I'm not hitting those numbers, or if I'm not feeling, 100% on some weeks, it's just more a case of understanding. And like Gina mentioned, probably more of a maintenance for me. So trying to hit that maintenance point of what I hit the week before, and not going in with the mindset of I have to hit a PB or have to lift heavier today. So for me, that's more the kind of approach that I take for myself. And I should also mention, personally, I don't have horrible sort of period or PMS type symptoms. So obviously tend to get the stomach cramps on day one, but it's definitely never been something that I've had to, take a day off training for personally. So for me, I guess I would say I'm lucky in that way. So I'll always just train as normal, really. When it comes to my clients and coaching, again, I take the same sort of advice around just really listening to their body, because every single one of my clients has a different situation. And, they have different symptoms, they feel differently. So it really is just about sort of listening to their body. And one thing that I find quite important for me as a coach when it comes to client check-ins is that I do get each of the women on my team to actually report what time of the cycle they're in when they are doing a check-in with me, because not only do I then understand a little bit of the mindset they might be in when they're writing statuses. Some weeks they might come in and just be like on top of the world. And then other weeks they might come in and they might seem a little bit like, oh, focusing on the negatives, or, and it really is helpful for me as a coach to be like, oh, well, you are leading into your period, so maybe this can explain a little bit about this, or, and obviously, as well as the physical result as well. We know that weight fluctuates during that time, or just before, which is completely normal. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration when doing, check-ins personally for my clients, especially if they are going for more results-based coaching. And I think that's something that probably some coaches may, I don't know, I'm hoping most coaches don't, but it's a huge consideration that should be factored in, is knowing your client's cycle time when they're checking in with you, right?
And being able to bring that awareness to the client, because often when you're in it, when you're feeling really negative, maybe your weight's gone up, you're feeling bloated, you don't realize, I know it sounds silly, but you don't realize, and you don't connect those dots. So, you coming to them going, hey, and I noticed that you're in your luteal phase. Maybe that's why you're feeling this way. And then it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
got it. And then you can just,
It's funny because I feel like we go through the same thing every month sometimes.
every month.
Where you're like, why is this happening? Oh yeah, wait. And I have to say, the first time that I really personally, when this really came apparent to me was when I was competing and I was coming so close to stage. And, when I was quite lean is when I really noticed the changes in my body coming into my menstrual cycle. And, I would come in to, close to stage time and obviously get my period, and the week of just thinking, what is going on? Like, I look like I'm not even, getting on the stage in a week. Like, and just even because I film myself in the gym, and do training videos, even just noticing, on the camera, like, wow, my body looks so different. And it's all in a matter of days that it can change drastically, right? Not to mention the scale, obviously, but just even the way you look and feel. So for me, that was a big kind of like, I don't know, just eye-opening moment where I was like, oh, just knowing that it's all part of the process, and that it just like it'll happen and then it will kind of go back to normal. So
and surrendering to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not trying to fight it. Yeah. Love it.
It's interesting. Psychologically surrendering to it's a good way to put it, Mel. I think back in my years of probably overdoing it, training too much or doing too many fitness classes, I would definitely notice that like just lack of power, or basically almost just feeling really, really down before getting my period. And that potentially as well was due to many, many factors such as nutrition, lack of sleep, like I was mentioning before, other psychological stresses going on, so it's all a part of it. And I've really noticed since starting seed cycling over the last 12 months that it's those dips or those PMS symptoms I just don't experience as much. And I think as well, I'm less in a mindset of many, many years ago. I used to be more in a deficit kind of mentality, or undernourishing my body, we'll put it that way. So I think as well that has a massive impact on women and their emotional status, which then flows onto so many other things, right? If women are feeling down, then that's going to impact the food they put in their mouths, whether they train or don't train, the fights or arguments they have with their family, their partners, so it all plays in together. But overall, I really believe in listening to my body. I encourage my clients to listen to their body and really just become more and more aware with where they're at, how their personal menstrual cycle works for them, notice where they can feel energized and push for more in the gym, and where those days are where they need to pull back, maybe do some more mobility, recovery, stretching, yoga, where that genuinely is a factor, and where they can keep hitting training really consistently.
And
I think
you do that with me. I was like, so Gina is my PT, and I love that if I, on the weeks where I am in that luteal phase and energy's low and I'm coming in going, oh, I'm tired, and we're able to still have like an awesome session, but you just switch it and know that I don't even know the technical, like what we're doing, but you just switch it and it turns out to be a great session, and I leave feeling tired but good, like really good, energized, and so great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing as well, there's so many things you can do to reduce intensity but still get in that training volume, so the trajectory towards your goals is still happening, but it's not at the perceptual or subjective level of where you're completely written off for the day. You don't want to go there necessarily. But I really encourage people to listen to their body and start to understand when is a genuine day and need of rest, like when is that a genuine requirement, and when is it more just a slight down version of your mood, and you just need to take care of yourself, a little bit of self-care, get a training session in, have a nice shower, and just kind of reset yourself, is knowing the difference between a genuine day for rest and not. So
And that probably brought up a good point just before, Mel, as well, about being open with your personal trainer about your cycle, or having a personal trainer that you feel comfortable talking to about that. Because if there are people out there who are, you know, consistently training with a trainer, yeah, it's definitely something that you can talk to your trainer about, and you can adapt the session to suit how you're feeling, I guess, on that day. The last thing that you want is to go into your personal training session and be absolutely smashed by your PT who has no idea that you're literally just about to come into your period, right? It's just not what you want.
Totally. And I think that because it is because we have so much more awareness of it, and especially within the fitness industry as well now, like you were saying, there's myths about it. How cool is that it's been talked about so much that there are some myths, and there's this conversation. Yeah, I think everyone working with a trainer should have this conversation. So powerful.
And they could be seen as myths, hey, or the other word could be like an overgeneralization. It's almost like what happens to a small portion of women is being generalized across all women. So that might be a better way of putting it, because for some it's not a myth. But I was just thinking about that as we did use the word myth earlier, but true, it's more like a generalization. Yeah.
There were a couple more things that we wanted to sort of add, I guess, before we sort of close it up. And so one of those things was about the increase in our metabolic rate around that late luteal phase as well. So that's the area or the time where a lot of women will see as the cravings time, the time where you want to reach for the chocolate. And I think a lot of women don't actually realize that their metabolic rate actually does rise during that time. And so it's probably a good idea to be proactive about this and actually remember to fuel your body with probably a little bit more food than you might even be used to if you are tracking or just going with how you're feeling. But knowing that that is a normal thing, and you're probably burning a couple of, do you know roughly how many extra calories a day? Around,
it's 100 to 200, but depends on the person, their size, their weight, their muscle mass.
Yeah. So you can be proactive about that, and obviously look to just increase a little bit of the volume of your food for your energy and also for how you're feeling, and might help to actually prevent some of those cravings from popping up as well.
And like we were saying, cravings are usually, like Mel, you've probably got really good input on this, but cravings are typically a sign, right? Like it's your body communicating something to you, right? And so I feel like, and you guys, I'm sure, have seen the same thing, but so many women are constantly in diet mode. You know, they're trying to get smaller, they're trying to get skinnier, and therefore they're technically undernourishing their body. And then, as you can see, if that's what's happening on a general basis, coming into menstruation, the bleed phase, and there's this shift in metabolism, you know, the body requires more energy, they're already under eating and undernourishing, of course cravings are going to come in, the body's missing out on what it needs, you know. So of course, and then the woman may beat herself up about her need to eat more, and it's just this horrible cycle, unless instead of just fueling in the first place and fueling yourself really well.
And knowing the different sort of cravings has really helped me. And this is something I teach through Real Food Freedom is, you know, there's the emotional eating cravings, there's when you're restricting yourself cravings, and then in the luteal phase, the hormonal cravings where your body just needs a bit more, and knowing that, and then not going to that extreme then, because, you know, for me it was no idea about it, and I just would get that craving, then would try to restrict myself and, you know, stick to what I was eating the week before, and then it would end up being a binge, and then I'd feel bloated, and then I wouldn't train and then you end up in this cycle, and then mentally, you know, the guilt and the shame and all that, but just being, you know, like now I know that in my luteal phase I'm gonna want more carbs, I'm gonna have the chocolate cravings, and knowing there's nothing wrong, it's just my body needs a little bit more, and giving myself that permission means it doesn't turn into a binge, and now it's kind of, there's more flow about it, and then still being aware, you know, there are still times where it's like it's more about procrastinating the craving, or tired, or whatever it is. So, you know, noticing the different types of cravings, it's so great.
That's great input.
Well, thanks, guys. I would like to, there's so much amazing information. I would like to end with one key takeaway for our listeners from both of you.
One key takeaway.
One.
Well, you can do more than one. But there's a lot.
Probably one of the main ones we thought would be great to share is like really understanding your own personal cycle and noticing any patterns specifically in your late luteal phase, so before you get your period. So notice if you do get cravings, notice if you do get premenstrual stress, as this may be an opportunity to be more proactive and fuel your body with more calories during this time. And that way you can set yourself up for success, you know, plan your training or your massage or your nutrition for those days. So you're really proactively preparing yourself month after month for that phase, for that period of time. Yeah.
Agree. I think probably the same takeaway. I guess for me, it's also to, like Gina said, listen to your own body and don't be also put off by you know, certain things that you do here when it comes to what can happen, what you should change, because like I do mention before, I've hit plenty of PBs during the periods in which people would say, oh, you probably don't want to hit PBs during this time. And it really does come down to the month, how you're feeling, and you personally. So just, it's great to sort of get that knowledge around how it all works and then apply that individually to yourself.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when Alice talks about PBs, I thought this was a really good thing to mention as well. She's not necessarily referring to a 1RM or a max lift.
No.
It may be, you know, a personal best of, you know, number of reps lifted with a certain weight, or it might be, you know, different. There's so many different factors, right? So sometimes I think when people say PB, they think your heaviest deadlift, your heaviest squat, but really she's talking about just a progression, some sort of progression. And so it is possible to still progress during those phases where you may not necessarily be supposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love it. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for helping us celebrate the Seed Cycle's first birthday and all of your support. We're going to link in under the video, the listeners will be able to find links to where they can find you both. And yeah, thanks again.
No worries. Thank you for having us on.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.